Hello, hello. I am Sinner, and today I am back with another book review after a bit of a break. But today we are reviewing Multiculturalism and the Politics of Guilt Toward a Secular Theocracy by Paul Edward Gottfried. Now, this book is a supplementary work to this book, After Liberalism. They both are sort of talking about the same thing. This one, its thesis is about the fact that liberalism, the ideology, or what we would label liberalism, has changed. In this book, he talks about the fact that what we would call a liberal has gone from like a small government capitalist type to a pro-welfare, big government, bureaucratic, managerial system that promotes things like free money, more Gibbs, um, and the multiculturalism and the promotion of sort of not Protestant bourgeois social and ethical lifestyles. This book um, goes into slightly further detail on those issues, and it's mainly talking about how uh, the state and society as a whole has one come to normalize um, this sort of what would you say therapeutic style authoritarianism, this like progressive left authoritarianism, where if you're too right wing, um, you'll get your party will probably get immediately destroyed. The international community, as what happened to Haider, who was an Austrian alt-right kind of guy, the international community will come together to make sure you can't get into power. Um, and it will be illegal for you to speak out against the system that you're in. And he talks about the Protestant characteristics that sort of allowed for this to happen. So the idea of like sort of a self-loathing society, he tries to trace it back to sort of Calvinist ideas of ultimate depravity, um, and he also talks about, um, which I think is probably the most interesting part, which is the end. He talks about, is it even actually really that good? You know, because you have to think about the current status quo. The current status quo is something that's manufactured. It's always something that's manufactured in elite theory. Nothing ever really is the status quo is never spontaneously generated. It's always maintained. So he doesn't talk about it until the very end, but why would you maintain it? Okay, so there's a few reasons why you would maintain a society that promotes multiculturalism, pluralism, and these sort of progressive ideas. One is that the people in power, this is what he says in this one, that's just their ideology, that's their religion. And I think that's true to an extent. But he also talks about the fact that he touches on, I would say, talks about it's a bit too strong. He touches on ideas of wage suppression, you know, the idea that it's it's good for capitalism basically to have, for example, with multiculturalism, if you're bringing in millions of people every year to your country, that suppresses the wages of the working class, which makes you, the elite, richer. And the other thing, which is more important, is that by having a multicultural project and by having um, this sort of larger pluralist cultural shift, it allows you to justify more state and managerial control over society. because now you can say, "Oh, we have to, someone has to look after these people. Someone has to look after all these people here. So us, the state, we will step up to do that." Um, or or we have to socialize all the people who don't agree with all these changes. We will be the ones to step up to do that. Um, and he does also talk about how the changes that are happening in the world are causing a small problem with, especially in Europe, with localist communities, right? So if you think about countries like Italy, for example, you can be an Italian, but you can also identify more closely with being a Sicilian over an Italian, or being from the Veneto Valley, or Lombardian. I don't know if that's the right word, but you get the idea. I'm not German, I'm Austrian, or I'm Bavarian, I'm not German. Um, and one of the things about our current status quo is that with the multicultural system, everything is getting flattened out into like this capitalist, you're only allowed to be superficially different. You're not allowed to have a meaningfully different culture. You're not allowed to have a meaningfully unique life or society. Everything has to be the same. But you can speak your funny little language. You know, you can be a multicultural. You have to be a post-liberal multicultural capitalist welfare state society. But you can speak your funny little language, and you can do your funny little rituals this day of the year or that day of the year. Kind of, now that I'm saying it, it kind of reminds me a bit of like Roman religion, how they would conquer a territory and you would be forced to worship um, the emperor of Rome. You'd be forced to pay taxes. You'd be forced to um, like integrate into the Roman economy. You'd be forced to submit to a Roman political structure, but you get to keep your little local gods, kind of thing. That's sort of how it works. You're allowed to be superficially different, but you're never allowed to actually be meaningfully different, because then that would lead to you having an independent power, sort of independent cultural identity that can't be shaped and reformed by the state, by therapeutic politics. And yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think he is right at the end when he basically says that it's not sustainable. The current system is not sustainable because on the one hand, you have these multicultural forces that are bringing in people who are fundamentally at odds with the worldview of um, Western society, the modern post-liberal Western society. So, like a basic example would be Islam. Um, you know, a lot of feminists criticize mass immigration, or a fair amount of them, not all of them, but some of them do. They criticize mass immigration for the reason that, like, oh, maybe bringing in a bunch of people who think women are lesser than men is bad for feminism in Britain or Europe. Um, maybe maybe bringing in these cultures that have a radically different view of how we should treat women is bad and unsustainable. And then the other thing, which you have to sort of grapple with, is that if you bring in lots of people with a different culture and a unique identity, it's not self-evident that they're always going to like assimilate and morph into this like post-identity, post-cultural, um, pluralist world where with all these only superficial surface level differences, but everyone's basically the same. And that's also the case with a lot of these immigrant communities. I think it's kind of fair enough, but they want to keep their identity. They want to keep their past and their history, their culture. They don't want to assimilate. Why would you expect them to assimilate, right? The Brits didn't assimilate when they went around the world, neither did the French, um, neither did the Portuguese or whoever, right? The instinct is to hold on to your culture. So you're creating like you're not creating a multicultural world. You're just sort of creating a, a soft segregated system, I guess you could say, like soft segregation. You know, for example, in the UK, you have areas, towns where like everyone's a Muslim, everyone goes to a Muslim private school, they bank at Muslim banks that are usury free, and so on and so forth. Obviously, that's going to happen. What do you like? The idea that they're just going to become these, they're going to stay as like slaves to the this multicultural machine. It's not self-evident. So I think that that prediction's been correct, that it's not sustainable. And we've seen that with Labour internationally, like the Australian Labour Party, the British Labour Party, and the Canadian Labour Party have all turned around on immigration, right? Australian Labour's like, no, we got to cut back immigration. We got to stop. We're going to try and get to net zero immigration. Mark Carney just did it. He just went dark woke, and just went boom, cut it. And Starmer's done the same thing. He's left now. I forget the name of the new guy from Manchester or wherever he's from. He's from the north. I know he's from the north, Liverpool or something. But it's the same thing. He said that he wants to try and stop the boats. It's like, whoa, that's obviously that's going to happen. This is because the advantages gained can't be indefinitely sustained when you create too big of like a client class, which is sort of the goal of the project, I guess you could say, to have a large client class that you can then use to justify the suppression of um, the middle classes or the average person, right? Um, because we have to hold up this system. So I have to tax you to existence. I have to police your thoughts. I have to do this. I have to do that because this is the new system. It's multicultural now. You have to do all these things. So yeah, I think it was a good book. It took me too long to read, considering it's only 150 pages, but I got through it. I got through it. Um, I would say Gottfried is a very good author. And yeah, that's all I really have to say. I'm Sinner. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.